May the words of my mouth and meditation of my heart be always acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Set your mind on things that are above, not on things that are on earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. Colossians 3, 2-3. It is no exaggeration to say that everything we truly know about love, we know through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. People often say they live for love, or maybe even repeating St. John, say something like, God is love. But what evidence do any of us have for these remarks? What evidence do we have that love is the most important part of life, or even that love is, quite frankly, worth it? One is attacked daily by various articles and studies about maybe love isn't worth it. What evidence do we have that love is worth it? Now, a romantic might tell us that love elevates them to the highest planes of ecstasy. A social scientist might reference a study pointing to happiness and fulfillment and their connection to something called love. But what is all that noise in comparison to the mighty thunderclaps of pain waiting for all of us at the inevitable end of our loves? Decay and death are the great no in our lives. They are the great no to all the relationships we cobble together with our own two hands. I want to love my parents forever. Death says no. I want to love my spouse forever. Death says no. I want to love my children forever. Death says no. Death and decay take those things we build together, those physical and emotional structures of love, and break them no matter how hard we scream in protest. We are reminded of this reality as if we needed to be. Maybe we do. We are reminded of this reality in the book of Ecclesiastes, where we read, "For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing, and they have no more reward. For their memory of them is forgotten. Their love and their hate and their envy have already perished, and forever they have no more share in all that is done under the sun." Ecclesiastes 9, 5-6. This eyes wide open honesty is the truth of the human condition without Christ's resurrection. When we combine this obvious reality with the pain-soaked pages of history or the blood-red headlines of today, it should shake to its very core the strange and mad convictions of those who seek love in this world without the assured and blessed hope of the resurrection. Why bother? If the world is not governed by triumphant, everlasting love, shown most perfectly in the historical resurrection of Jesus Christ, why bother with love? You will never be able to create more love in your life than you will suffer pain. Surely, if there is no resurrection of Christ, then all of our calls to love our neighbor will be shouted down and enfeebled by our lust, our bitterness, our cruelty, our selfishness. These will reign in our hearts and they will reign in the world. They seem to on a day-to-day basis. Therefore, we ask the question, why resurrection? Why does God do this? It's because there's no event that could silence this collection of our failings like the resurrection of a publicly executed man from the dead. No other act is capable of demonstrating the great, abiding, life-affirming truth that God is love. Nothing else. But what does that reality actually mean? What does it mean that God is love? It means that love, eternal, divine, perfect love, is the reason that there is a creation. And the manifestation of love's true capacity and identity and power is the creation's inexorable goal, a goal none of us can knock off of its plan. No evil can knock it off its plan. What evidence do we have of this? That's a very good question to ask. That's the right question to ask. What evidence do I have of this? Jesus Christ's life, death, and resurrection are the empirical evidence by which we know this truth, that we know God is love. To quote the Anglican bishop and theologian Charles Gore, he wrote, "We behold in Jesus love the motive, love individualizing, love impartial and universal, love victorious through death. And he that hath seen him, he that hath seen Jesus, we know hath seen the Father." Christ's love is the Father's love. There is nothing behind it to overcome it, nothing outside of it to escape it, nothing below it is too small for it. This is the Christian gospel. Therefore, to be a Christian is not to live in a world of fake smiles and cheap delusional happiness, nor is it to live in a world of rank hypocrisies and conflicted loyalties. None of that's real. None of that matters. No, to be a Christian is to live in depth, fully aware of God's power and judgment, while also living in resurrection, fully aware of God's mercy and love. But something we must be very careful about, particularly as modern people. We must not pit God's judgment against his love. No, the cross is the greatest act of love ever enacted on this planet. And the resurrection is the greatest act of judgment against all the evil which clouds our minds and soils our hands. It makes it all pathetic and silly. God's love, the only true and eternal love, the only love that has stripped the grave of its power. That love is not concerned with just making us happy. It's not concerned with just making us a little more comfortable, a little bit more happy. It's not an add-on. After all, pigs are happy in mud. My dog is happy when he licks himself. A teenage boy is happy watching a YouTube video about people falling down the stairs. But none of that happiness, none of it, is why we were created. Rather, God's triumphant love takes our eyes and hearts off of the misery and loneliness and purposelessness which drive men and women to the slow-motion suicide of a world that has forgotten forever. The reality of Christ's empty tomb, the reality of life after death, demands a radical rearrangement of our everyday priorities. How could it not? One that will obviously distinguish us from those living lives surrounded by the contradictions that are killing them, the lies that are killing them. Resurrection means that we aren't running out of time. It means we don't need a bucket list. It means we don't have to worry about missing this opportunity or that experience or that adventure because immortality beckons us. Life in the new heaven and the new earth is on the horizon. And so all of our actions become about preparation and thanksgiving to our God for what he has done in giving us love everlasting. Preparation and thanksgiving are our lives, not worry, not fear, not anger. If that is our assured hope, if We are assuredly hopeful about the resurrection because we know it has happened. And I pray that is your hope. The only reasonable response, no matter what our age, is to go to war. It is to go to war against anything that distracts us from lives of preparation and thanksgiving. That's the language St. Paul uses today, right? What does he say? He says, "Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you. Sexual immorality, passion, evil desires, and covetousness, which is idolatry. You must put them all away: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth." Colossians 3, 5 through 6 and 8. The mistake we have to not make here is this is not some kind of checklist for how to get into heaven. Not doing none of these things, doing these things is going to save you. You were saved when the King of the earth climbed up on a cross after living a sinless life. I'm pretty sure no one in here can live a sinless hour, right? So if you think you're saving yourself, let's have a talk after the service, right? No, that's not how this works. You live in this way because this is the only way to live a life of internal and external integrity. It's the only way to live in truth. It is how we live as new men and women, restored and recreated in the image of our Creator, in the image of the resurrected Lord who actually saved you. If resurrection is our assured hope, we lie to ourselves and to the world every time we live as if our destiny is an everlasting life. This is a term I hate, but I'm going to use it today. People love to talk about having an authentic life. I had an atheist yell at me 2 days ago, as a matter of fact, about living an authentic life and how repressive I was. Mind you, I said to her, "I love you, do you need anything?" That was the response, right? But that shouldn't be a surprise to us. That's how the real world works, right? But anyway, living an authentic life. What does that actually mean? Living an authentic life is not you or I responding to our most debased desires in the most efficient way. That's how it usually ends up working. It isn't finding the right person to marry. That's great, but that's not your life. It isn't work fulfillment or even, frankly, a nice house with a really good HOA, right? That's not what this is about. No. Living an authentic life is living right now as those whose truest life begins when we embrace our resurrected King in a world without pain or suffering or fear. That is what you are living for. You are living for nothing. That life won't happen by accident. No one accidentally lives for that life. It will take real work, of course, as all things do, centered on your participation in the church Christ has given you, centered on the word he has given you, centered on the sacraments he has given you. But what is our gift from that? Well, our gift is true love. True love can only reverberate out of our participation in the God who is love. Everything else is a shadow of love. Everything else is a signpost maybe pointing us to the real love, but it is not the true love. How could it be? Your new life of preparation and thanksgiving is to be focused on what actually matters. Love eternal, rather than the ashes of this fallen world, rather than the ashes which feel so real until the wind scatters them out of our hands. That can be a bit scary, thinking about our end, thinking about ashes and dust. But I beg you today, don't be afraid. You don't ever have to be afraid ever again. You don't ever have to be afraid ever again. As Ecclesiastes tells us, all are dust, and to dust all return. We say it at our funeral services. Right? Anyone who's ever been to one, everyone who's ever buried one at our funeral service, you know what the graveside say, those same words. Dust, dust to return. But thanks to the resurrection, thanks to the event we celebrate today, we know what God can do with dust and ashes. We know what God can do with bodies broken by the sins of men. And we know what God can do with love. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen.